The room was quiet. Too quiet. Only the soft sound of breathing filled the space, but it was not a child's breath. It was the breath of a mother, sitting alone beside a cradle that no longer carried life. Her hands shook as she touched the edge of the small wooden frame. The cradle was still polished, still smooth, still warm with the memory of gentle rocking. She had cleaned it every day, even when there was no child to lay inside. Dust never dared to stay there. It was not just a cradle. It was a piece of her heart carved into wood. Her name was Sarai. She belonged to a people who lived under the shadows of tall silver trees, a race that believed songs were stronger than weapons. From the moment her child was born, she had sung to her every night, soft notes, gentle promises, a lullaby that spoke of peace and dreams of tomorrow. But tomorrow had betrayed her. The night of the raid had come with fire in the sky. Strange machines descended. Their metal claws ripped through her village. Houses fell, the trees burned, and cries filled the night air. She remembered clutching her baby, running, her heart pounding like a drum. Then the explosion, blinding light, smoke, and pain. When she woke, her arms were empty. The cradle in her home was empty, and the world inside her became empty too. Now she sat in that silence every evening. She sang anyway. Her voice was cracked but steady. Sleep, little star.
Sleep, little light.
The song drifted into the air as if the child could still hear. The neighbors pitied her. Some whispered she had lost her mind. Others said she was cursed, that no song could bring back what the humans had taken. But Sarai did not care. She sang for herself. She sang because the silence without her song was worse than death. Each night she rocked the cradle, slow and careful, as if the baby might wake at any moment. She imagined the weight of her daughter's small body. She imagined the soft warmth of her skin, the tiny fingers curling around her own. The cradle creaked with every movement, a sound like a ghost's breath. But deep inside, her heart fought against hope. The humans, that was the word everyone used with anger and fear. Creatures of flesh and iron, they came from the stars. They fought without honor. They stole children. That was the worst rumor. The humans did not just kill, they took. For what reason, no one knew. Experiments, perhaps, or slavery, or something darker. Sarai tried not to believe it. She wanted to think her baby had simply gone to the stars like all lost souls. But in her dreams, she saw shadows carrying the small bundle away. She saw metal hands lifting her child from the smoke. Every dream ended the same. Her running, her calling, and the cradle empty. This night was no different. The firelight of the hearth flickered across the cradle. Sarai's voice trembled as she sang the same lullaby again. Sleep, little star.
Sleep, little light.
The words were soft, almost broken. Yet there was a strange strength in them, a determination hidden like steel beneath silk. Outside, the forest rustled. A wind moved through the silver trees. The sound pressed against the window like a whisper. She paused in her song, her ears sharp. For a moment she thought she heard something else. A low sound, not the forest. A step, a breath. Her hand froze on the cradle. Her heart skipped. She listened. Nothing. Only the night creatures moving. She forced herself to breathe again and continued the lullaby. But the thought stayed with her. What if something was out there? The war had ended months ago, but the fear remained. Villages still spoke of wandering soldiers, of machines that stalked the woods, and sometimes in the dead of night people swore they heard crying, an infant's cry far from any home. Sarai tightened her shawl around her shoulders. She knew it was foolish to dream. Yet her heart betrayed her with every beat. What if her child was alive? What if the cradle was only empty because someone had stolen her daughter away? Her song grew softer. Tears burned her eyes. She touched the inside of the cradle, her palm sliding along the smooth wood as if she might feel the warmth of her child again. But it was cold. The night stretched long. Her voice weakened. The cradle rocked a little slower. The firelight grew dim. Sarai lowered her head, whispering one last verse before silence took the room. Sleep, little star. Your mother is near. The cradle stopped moving. Her eyes closed. But her ears still listened to the night outside. And for just a heartbeat she thought she heard it again. Not the wind, not the forest, but something else. A faint sound. A step, a breath. She did not move. Her heart pounded like thunder in her chest. The cradle sat between her and the door. The shadows seemed deeper than before, and then silence returned. Sarai told herself it was nothing. Just the forest. just her own imagination. Yet she kept her hand on the cradle all night long as if protecting it. She could not shake the feeling that the empty cradle would not stay empty forever. Something or someone was watching. Morning light spilled through the cracks of Sarai's window. She woke with her hand still resting on the cradle. Her throat was dry, her body heavy, but her heart beat fast. The sound she thought she heard last night, the step, the breath, still haunted her. She stepped outside. The village was already alive. Smoke rose from cooking fires, children chased each other, and elders sat together under the wide silver trees. Yet whenever Sarai walked past, voices dropped and eyes turned away. Everyone knew where she had been the night before. Everyone knew she still sang to the empty cradle. They pitied her. But some feared her too. An old neighbor, Mira, met her with a basket of roots. "Sarai," she said in a low voice, "you must stop this. It has been too long. The child is gone. Your song is only opening wounds." Sarai did not answer. She had grown used to such words. Instead, she turned toward the well, her steps slow. But as she filled her jar, she heard something new, something dangerous. Two young hunters were whispering nearby. "They say a child was seen." "In the forest," one muttered. "That is foolish. No child could live out there." "Not alone," the first replied, his tone heavy with warning. "But with them." Them. The word dropped like a stone into Sarai's chest. Humans. Her fingers trembled, nearly spilling the water. She forced herself to act calm, to move as though she had not heard. But inside, her thoughts burned. A child seen in the forest, humans, could it be? No, she should not hope. Hope was poison. Still, she listened for more. "The elders forbid speaking of it," the hunter continued. "They say it is only a trick. The humans want to lure us out, to capture more of us. Then why would anyone spread it? Because some swear they saw her. A little one, wrapped in cloth, carried in the arms of a stranger." Sarai's heart stopped. Her vision blurred. Wrapped in cloth. Her child had been wrapped in a white cloth the night of the raid. She turned sharply, too sharply. The hunters saw her eyes and fell silent. They looked away, guilty, but it was too late. She had heard enough. That night, Sarai returned to her small house, her chest heavy with both fear and desperate fire. She rocked the cradle again, but the song sounded different now. It was no longer only a song of grief, it was a question, a call, a demand to the universe. If her child was alive, why had no one told her? Why did the elders forbid it? Why hide such a rumor? The answer came later, when Mira visited again. She closed the door quickly behind her and spoke in a hushed voice. "You heard them, didn't you?" Mira asked, her eyes narrow with worry. Sarai stiffened. "I don't know what you mean. Don't play with me." "I saw your face. You heard the rumor of the child," Sarai's voice broke. "Is it true? Tell me." Mira lowered her head. "It is only talk. No one knows for sure. But the elders say it is dangerous. If the humans truly keep one of our children, what will you do? Walk into their camp? You would never return." Sarai's hands clenched at her sides. "If my daughter is alive, then I must return with her or not at all." Mira grabbed her arm, her voice urgent. "Do not be foolish. The humans are hunters. They are thieves. And some say they are worse. They use our children for things we cannot speak of. If you go searching, you may find only horror. And if you fail, they may take you too." The words cut like knives, but Sarai's heart refused to surrender. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also a spark of life. That night, when the fire burned low, she sat beside the cradle again. She whispered not to the child this time, but to herself, "I will find you." Her mind replayed every detail of the hunter's whisper. The forest. A stranger carrying a child. The elder's silence. The forbidden rumor was more than gossip. It was a map, faint and fragile, but still a map. Outside, the silver trees swayed, their leaves whispering in the dark. She thought again of the sound she had heard the night before. A step, a breath. Perhaps it was not her imagination. Perhaps someone really had been near her home. Her skin prickled. Was someone watching her? Guarding her? Or warning her away? The cradle rocked as her hand pushed it, the wood creaking like a heartbeat. She closed her eyes and let the sound guide her thoughts. She pictured her child's face, her small eyes, the way she used to reach for her hair. And for the first time since the raid, Sarai's grief began to turn into something sharper. Not just sorrow. Not just fear. But resolve, the rumor was forbidden because it might be true. The elders wanted safety, silence, obedience. But Sarai was a mother, and no mother could remain silent when her child's shadow still walked the earth. She leaned close to the cradle, her voice steady. They think they can stop me, but I will go, even if it is a trap, even if it is death. Her song rose again in the darkness, but this time it was not just a lullaby. It was a vow. The forest was alive with whispers. Every rustle of the leaves, every crack of a twig felt like a voice speaking to Sarai. She moved carefully along the narrow path, her shawl tight around her shoulders, her ears sharp. She had left the village before dawn, when the mist was still heavy and no one would see her go. The rumor had burned in her mind all night. Now she was searching for proof. Her heart beat fast as she stepped deeper into the silver woods. The tall trees caught the morning light, making the forest glow as if stars had fallen into the branches. Normally, the beauty of the place would calm her. But not today. Today, every shadow seemed to hide something. She reached a clearing where the grass grew high and wild. At first, she saw nothing. Then her eyes caught a small shape near the roots of a tree. She bent down, her hands shaking as she lifted it. It was cloth, worn, torn at the edge, but still soft. White cloth, her breath caught in her throat. The same kind she had wrapped around her daughter the night of the raid. The same fabric she had woven herself. She pressed it to her face, and for the first time in many months she smelled something faint but familiar. The scent of her child. Her knees weakened. She almost fell. Tears blurred her vision, but she held the cloth tight, as though it was proof that her baby's heartbeat still echoed somewhere in the world. Then another detail made her freeze. The cloth was clean. Not new, but not covered in mud or dirt as it should have been after months in the forest. Someone had kept it safe. Someone had been here recently. A chill ran down her spine. She turned sharply, scanning the trees. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Only silence answered. The forest held its breath. She stood still for a long moment, her body tense until the wind moved again through the leaves. Slowly, she hid the cloth in her shawl and continued walking. Further along the path, she found more signs. A piece of fruit half-eaten left on a rock. A strange footprint in the soil. Too large to belong to her people, but not the shape of a beast either. The heel was narrow, the toes longer. Human. Her stomach tightened. Fear and hope twisted together inside her like vines. If the humans were truly here, it meant danger. Yet if they had her child, it also meant she was alive. As the sun rose higher, Sarai followed the faint trail until she reached a stream. The water glittered, reflecting the light, but her attention was on the bank. There, pressed into the wet soil, was another mark. Not a boot, not a paw. Small. Round. A child's footprint. Sarai dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she touched the shallow print. Her eyes closed. Her breath came fast. She imagined her daughter standing there, dipping her toes into the cold water, maybe even laughing. The image was so real it hurt. Her heart told her what logic refused to accept. Her daughter was alive. But then came another sound, a low hum, drifting faintly through the air. At first she thought it was the wind. Then her ears caught the rhythm. It was not random. It was a tune. Her song. Sarai's blood turned cold. Someone was humming her lullaby. She rose quickly, scanning the trees again. The voice was distant, soft, almost playful. She spun toward the sound, every nerve burning. But when she stepped forward, it stopped. The forest returned to silence. Sarai's breathing was sharp and uneven. She clutched the cloth tighter, her body trembling. Whoever was out there had heard her song. They knew it. They had repeated it. And the only one she had ever sung it to was her child. The thought was too much. She stumbled back to the stream, her knees sinking into the mud. Fear pressed against her ribs like a blade. If a human carried her daughter, then the human had also stolen her song. That was worse than theft. It was desecration. But if they sang the lullaby, if they kept the cloth, if they cared enough to keep her alive, then what did that mean? Sarai sat there for a long time, staring at the water, her reflection broken by ripples. Her mind raced between terror and wonder. When she finally rose, her resolve was iron. She would not return to the village. She would not listen to the elders. She would follow the signs, every footprint, every whisper, every stolen note of her song. She turned back toward the forest path, her shawl wrapped tightly around her and the white cloth pressed against her heart. Her child was not gone. She was here, somewhere beyond the trees, somewhere near enough that her song still reached her, and Sarai would not stop until she found her. Above her, the silver leaves rustled again. The forest seemed to whisper encouragement or warning. She could not tell which. But one thing was certain. The empty cradle at home would not remain empty much longer. Someone had left signs. And Sarai was ready to follow them all. The forest grew darker as the sun fell. Sarai had walked all day following faint signs, cloth, footprints, the hum of her own lullaby. Each clue had pulled her further from the safety of the village and deeper into silence. By nightfall, even the birds had stopped calling. Only the sound of her steps and the pounding of her heart filled the air. She reached a hollow tree and stopped to rest. Her legs shook, her throat was dry, but her mind would not let her stop for long. She was close. She could feel it like heat in her bones. Somewhere nearby, her child still breathed. The wind stirred the branches. Shadows shifted along the ground. She pulled her shawl tighter and whispered to herself, "Not far now." Then she froze. A sound. Not wind. Not the forest. Steps. Slow. Heavy. Careful. She crouched low, pressing her body against the tree, her hand covering her mouth to silence her breath. The steps drew closer, steady and deliberate, as if someone knew exactly where they were going. Her eyes darted through the trees. And then she saw it, a figure, tall, broad, and strange in shape. Its form was outlined in the faint moonlight. She saw long legs, a hunched back, and arms holding something close to its chest. Her blood turned cold. A human. Every story she had heard since childhood rushed back at once. Monsters from the stars, thieves of children, flesh covered in strange cloth and metal, hands that crushed, eyes that burned, hearts that felt nothing. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She wanted to scream, but fear strangled her voice. Instead, she remained frozen in the shadows, staring as the figure stepped into the clearing. The human stopped in the center, breathing hard. Its face was pale under the light, its hair dark and tangled. Its clothes were torn, its arms dirty. But none of that mattered, because Sarai's eyes had already fallen on what it carried. A bundle. Small. Wrapped in white cloth. Her chest tightened so hard she thought her ribs might break. Her fingers dug into the bark of the tree. The human shifted the bundle carefully, almost gently. Then it turned slightly, and Sarai saw what she had been longing for, dreading, and dreaming of for months. A tiny face, her daughter's face, alive. The child stirred, eyes half closed, a faint whimper escaping her lips. The human hushed her softly, rocking the bundle in a rhythm too familiar. Sarai's body moved before her mind could stop it. She stepped out of the shadows, her voice breaking like thunder across the clearing. Mine. The human spun around, startled. Its eyes widened as it saw her. For a moment, both stood frozen, staring across the small space that separated them. Sarai's eyes burned with tears. She wanted to rush forward, to grab her child, to crush her against her chest and never let go. But her legs held her back, her instincts screaming caution. The human raised a hand slowly, not in attack but in something else. A gesture of peace. Its mouth moved, struggling with words in her language. Yours. The sound was broken, the voice rough, but the meaning struck her heart like lightning. Her child. Hers. The human lowered to one knee, holding out the bundle. The gesture was clumsy but careful, like offering treasure. Sarai's breath came fast, her body shaking. She took a single step forward, then another, but doubt crawled into her mind. Was this a trap? A cruel trick? Why would a human return what they had stolen? Why? She whispered, her voice trembling. The human shook its head as if searching for words. Fire, war, many die, save. The word echoed in her ears, strange and impossible. A human saving? She wanted to reject it, to scream liar. But the child stirred again, her cry rising into the night. The sound broke Sarai's fear. She rushed forward at last, her arms reaching. The human did not resist. It placed the bundle into her hands. The weight hit her like a flood of memory. The warmth of her child's body, the softness of her skin, the smell of her hair. Tears streamed down Sarai's face as she clutched the baby to her chest. Her lullaby rose without thought, trembling and broken but alive. The cradle was no longer empty. But even as joy consumed her, Suspicion lingered. She looked at the human, her voice sharp through her sobs. You saved her. But why? The human looked down, shame heavy in its posture. It touched its chest with one hand, then pointed to the child. No harm, protect. Sarai stared, her heart torn. Could it be true? Could a creature she had been taught to fear carry mercy? The stories of her people clashed with the living proof before her. The forest was silent around them. Only her song and the faint cry of the child filled the night. The human rose slowly, stepping back as if ready to leave. But Sarai's voice cut through the air. Wait. Her grip on her child tightened, but her eyes did not leave the figure. Fear, gratitude, and doubt swirled inside her like a storm. She did not know if this human was a savior or another kind of thief, but she knew one thing: the story of the empty cradle had just changed forever. Sarai's arms clung to her child as if the world might tear her away again. She pressed her face into the soft cloth, breathing in the faint scent of life she thought was lost forever. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her eyes never left the figure standing across from her. The human. It had not run. It had not attacked. It only stood there silent, its chest rising and falling heavily, as if the act of returning the child had drained the last of its strength. Sarai's voice cut through the silence, low and sharp. Why? The human's eyes flickered with something she did not expect. Not the cold hunger of a thief. Not the fire of an enemy. Something else, sorrow. It pressed a hand to its chest, searching for words in her tongue. War, fire, many gone. She cry. I take, protect. The words were broken, clumsy, but each one fell heavy. Protect, not steal. Not harm, protect. Sarai's mind rebelled. Everything she had been told since childhood screamed against it. Humans were destroyers, hunters, thieves. They did not save. They did not protect, and yet, here was her daughter. Alive, cradled once in those strange arms, her voice trembled. Why would you save her? Why not kill her like the others? The human's gaze lowered. Slowly, it reached into its torn coat and pulled out something small. Sarai tensed, ready to shield her child. But the human did not draw a weapon. Instead, it held up a necklace. A simple charm, cracked and worn, it was shaped like a star. Sarai stared. Among her people, stars were sacred symbols of life. Mothers gave them to newborns, a promise of light even in darkness. She had given such a charm to her daughter, but it had been lost in the chaos of the raid. This one was different, made of strange metal, clearly human, but the meaning was the same. The human touched the charm, then touched the child, then its chest. Its voice was quiet, almost pleading. Lost mine. Found her, same. The word struck Sarai like a blade. Lost mine. Could it mean the human had also lost a child? For a moment, the forest seemed to spin around her. She clutched her daughter tighter, feeling her tiny breath against her neck. The human's eyes, weary and broken, held no threat, only a mirror of her own grief. Her heart screamed at her to trust nothing, to run. But her soul whispered something different. Perhaps grief was universal. Perhaps even an enemy could feel it. The baby stirred, letting out a small cry. Sarai rocked her gently, whispering the lullaby that had once been sung to an empty cradle. The sound filled the clearing. To her shock, the human's lips moved. It hummed the same tune, soft and careful, matching her melody. Her eyes widened. Rage and awe collided inside her. You, she began, her voice sharp. How do you know this song? The human hesitated, then pointed at the child. She cry. I sing. She stopped, her knees weakened. Her lullaby stolen, carried across enemy lips. And yet, if the song had comforted her child, how could she hate it? Sarai's tears blurred her vision again. The cradle had been empty for so long that she had nearly drowned in despair. Now her daughter breathed, alive, safe in her arms because of a human. Her voice shook as she whispered, You kept her alive. The human nodded once, firmly. Its shoulders sagged as if the truth had been carried too long in silence. But Sarai could not silence her doubts. Why give her back now? Why not keep her? Use her? The human's jaw tightened. It touched its chest again, then spoke slowly. Because she not mine. She, yours. I wrong people. But this no wrong. She with mother. Sarai's breath caught. For the first time she saw the human not as a monster, but as something painfully familiar. A parent who had once held a child, now lost to the fire of war. The truth settled like a heavy stone. The human had risked everything. Not for power, not for cruelty, but for the life of a child that was not its own. Her grip on her daughter tightened. Gratitude burned in her chest, but so did fear. What would her people say if they knew? Would they call her child cursed for being touched by human hands? Would they demand blood for blood even against one who had saved instead of destroyed? The night deepened around them, stars glittering through the branches. Sarai's lullaby faded into silence. She studied the human, her enemy, her savior, her mystery. Finally, her voice came, quiet but firm. You saved her. For that, I cannot hate you, but I cannot trust you either. The human's eyes lowered, accepting the words. It stepped back as if ready to leave. But before it turned, it looked once more at the child, its face softened by something no enemy should feel. Love. Sarai felt her heart twist. The shocking truth was no longer just that her child lived. It was that the wall between enemy and ally was thinner than she had ever believed. And that truth, fragile and dangerous, could change everything. She held her daughter closer, her eyes still locked on the figure. For the first time, the cradle in her home was no longer empty. But the question of trust, of what the human's act truly meant, weighed heavy. The war had stolen too much. And now, in this fragile moment, Sarai realized it had also given her something unexpected. Doubt. Doubt in hate. Doubt in truth, and that doubt was more dangerous than any blade. The clearing was still. The stars watched from above, cold and silent, while Sarai held her daughter as if her arms alone could guard her from every shadow. Across from her, the human remained standing, its pale face weary but calm. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The child stirred, letting out a small cry, breaking the heavy silence. Sarai rocked her gently, whispering the lullaby, but her eyes never left the stranger. The human shifted its weight, lowering itself to sit on the ground, keeping a careful distance. A strange gesture, non-threatening, almost respectful. Sarai's voice finally cut through the night. Why are you still here? The human raised its eyes. Its words came slow, broken, but clear enough. Not safe. Forest. Danger. I stay. Watch. She almost laughed, a bitter sound. You think I would trust a human to protect me? The figure said nothing, but its gaze did not waver. It only nodded once, as though it understood her doubt, yet refused to leave. Sarai's heart warred with itself. Part of her wanted to drive the human away, to shield her daughter from its touch, its voice, its presence. Another part, quieter but stronger, remembered the cloth, the footprints, the lullaby. Without this creature, her child might not have survived. Still, trust was a dangerous seed. If she let it grow, it could choke her judgment. She whispered almost to herself, if my people knew of this, they would kill you. The human did not flinch. Instead, it touched its chest and said, then, I hide, far but child safe, that, enough. The word struck her harder than she expected. Enough. Was that truly the only reason? No reward, no power, just the child's safety. Her daughter's small hand curled against her shawl, pulling her back to the moment. She stared at the human, her voice sharp again. If you truly mean no harm, prove it. Tell me why you saved her when your kind destroyed everything else. The human's eyes lowered. It was silent for a long moment, then drew something from its pocket. Not a weapon, another small charm, the same star-shaped trinket she had seen before. It held the charm in both hands, as if cradling something invisible. Its voice cracked. Mine. Gone. Fire. No pain. Not again. Sarai's breath caught. Grief. Loss. It was written in the human's face, in its broken words, in the way it held the charm as though it were a memory too fragile to touch. Her own grief mirrored it. The empty cradle. The endless nights of song. The silence of a child's absence. For a moment she saw not an enemy, but another parent, haunted by the same shadows. But her suspicion clung to her like iron chains. Grief does not erase blood, she said coldly. Your kind still burned my home. They still stole others. Why should I see you as different? The human lifted its head slowly. Its voice was quiet, steady. Because I choose. I choose save, not destroy. The simplicity of the words unsettled her. Choice. Could a human truly choose mercy in a world of war? The forest gave no answers. Only the wind stirred, carrying the sound of far-off howls. Wolves or worse. Sarai's grip on her child tightened. The human glanced toward the noise, then back at her. Stay close, it said, its tone urgent. Night, not safe, she hesitated. To stand beside a human was unthinkable. To walk with one was betrayal. And yet she was no longer alone. She had a child to protect. If danger came, she could not face it with one arm holding her daughter and the other empty. Slowly, painfully, she nodded. One night. No more. The human dipped its head as if accepting her command. It shifted to the edge of the clearing where the shadows pressed thick. Sarai remained where she was, rocking the child, but her eyes followed the figure's every move. Hours passed. The fireflies dimmed. The cries of the forest beasts grew closer, then faded. And still the human stayed awake, its eyes scanning the darkness like a guard. Sarai did not sleep. How could she? She sang softly to her daughter, her lullaby carrying through the night. To her surprise, she heard the faintest hum from across the clearing, the human matching her tune almost too quietly to notice. Her heart twisted. Rage and comfort tangled inside her. She hated that it knew her song. She hated that its voice carried it, and yet, the sound eased the child's cries. As dawn touched the horizon, Sarai realized the truth she had tried to deny. The human was not her friend. He was not her kin, but it was not her enemy either. Not now. The alliance was uneasy, fragile as glass, built not on trust, but on something more dangerous, need. When the first light touched the cradle of trees above, Sarai rose with her child in her arms. She looked at the human and spoke the words she never thought she would say. Walk with me. The human's eyes widened slightly, then softened. It nodded, standing slowly, its movements careful. Together they stepped into the forest, not as allies, not as enemies, but as two broken souls bound by a single fragile thread, the life of a child. The forest woke slowly with the dawn. Pale light crept through the silver leaves, chasing away the shadows of night. Sarai walked carefully, her daughter pressed close to her chest, her eyes never leaving the path ahead. Behind her, the human followed at a cautious distance. The uneasy silence between them carried more weight than words. Each step forward felt like walking on a fragile bridge. One wrong move and it would collapse. Sarai's heart fought with itself. Every instinct told her to fear, to despise, to strike before she was struck. Yet every glance at her child reminded her why she did not. The baby breathed, warm and alive because of the human walking just behind her. The baby stirred and whimpered, and Sarai whispered her lullaby. Her voice was low, steady, but filled with exhaustion. The human's head lifted slightly at the sound. Its lips moved again, humming softly along as it had done the night before. Sarai clenched her jaw. She wanted to silence it, yet she could not deny the truth. The song kept the child calm. By midday they reached a ridge. From the top, Sarai could see the faint smoke of her village in the distance. Her heart ached. Home, safety, her people. But her breath grew shallow as she thought of what would happen if she returned with the human beside her. The elders would not listen. They would see only an enemy. They would demand blood for the war, not mercy for an act of kindness. And worse, they might see her child as tainted, touched by human hands no longer pure. Her steps slowed. Doubt weighed on her like stone. The human noticed and stopped as well. It pointed toward the smoke. Home, it said. Sarai turned, her eyes sharp. Not for you. The human nodded slowly, accepting her words. It lowered its gaze, then crouched on the ground. Its hands opened in a gesture of release as if to say, take her child, take her future, and walk away. But Sarai could not move. Her heart battled itself louder than any war drum. Here stood the one she should hate most, the one her people cursed as thief and killer. Yet it had chosen differently. It had saved instead of destroyed. Her child's small hand touched her chin, pulling her gaze down. The infant's eyes, wide and clear, held no knowledge of war, no knowledge of hate. Only life, only trust. Sarai looked back at the human. The silence between them stretched long until she whispered, why give her back? Why not keep her? The human lifted its head, its voice quiet. Not mine. She yours, always yours, the words shook her. For so long the cradle had been empty, her song unanswered. She had believed hope was poison. Yet here was proof that even in war, something fragile could survive. But now came the choice. If she returned to the village alone with her child, she would be welcomed with tears and relief. No one would know the truth. The elders would praise her strength and the cradle would no longer be empty. Yet in silence, a debt would remain, a life saved by a human's hand. If she returned with the human, everything would change. The village would rage. They might kill the human before it could speak. And worse, they might take her child from her, fearing what it meant to be carried by an enemy. Her child whimpered again, as if sensing her turmoil. Sarai rocked her gently, her voice breaking into the lullaby once more. The melody filled the ridge, soft and trembling. To her surprise, the human did not hum this time. It only listened, its eyes lowered, as if the song was not for the child alone, but for both of them. When the song ended, Sarai knew the answer had already taken root in her heart. She stepped closer, her grip on her daughter tight. Her voice was low, fierce, and steady. "If you follow me, they will kill you. If you stay here, the forest may kill you. Either way, your path is death." The human's eyes met hers. For the first time it smiled, not wide, not cruel, but small, sad, and true. "If child live, I accept," her breath caught. She wanted to curse it for its foolishness, for its sacrifice, for the way it had placed her daughter's life above its own. But she could not. Her throat tightened and she turned her face away so it would not see her tears. Finally she whispered, "Then walk behind me. Do not speak, do not resist, perhaps there will be another choice." The human bowed its head, silent. Together they began the descent from the ridge. The smoke of the village grew clearer, the voices of her people faint in the distance. Each step was heavy with fear, with doubt, with hope. The cradle at home was no longer empty. Her child would once again sleep to her song, but now there was more than a child in her arms. There was a truth she could not ignore. The enemy was not as simple as she had been told. And the choice before her was no longer only about her daughter. It was about the future. As they reached the edge of the forest, Sarai stopped. Her voice, soft but sharp as steel, cut the silence. "This is where it begins. Whether for peace or for blood, I do not know." The human stood behind her, silent, waiting. Her daughter shifted in her arms, safe, breathing, alive. And Sarai knew the truth. The cradle was full, but the world beyond it was still empty, waiting for what choice she would make.